Hi and welcome to the Being Da podcast, brought to you by Home-Start Glasgow South. I'm Doug.
And I'm Joe, and today we're going to be talking to our colleague Amy about breastfeeding.
That's right, and Amy, welcome.
Thank you, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here.
So Amy is our colleague, and Amy, why don't you tell us what you do here at Home-Start?
Yeah, so I'm the Perinatal Support Coordinator for Home-Start Glasgow South, but I'm also a trained breastfeeding peer supporter for the Breastfeeding Network.
And what does that entail?
So all of my work at Home-Start Glasgow South is supporting families from pregnancy until their baby is around the age of 2. We provide support through our volunteer home visiting service. So families would be matched with a volunteer from pregnancy in order to support them in their home with all sorts of things, whether it's emotional support, practical support, adjustment to family life, whatever it may be. That's what I'm there to coordinate within Home-Start Glasgow South.
Excellent. So what I think we'll start off with is 4 quick-fire questions. I'll fire one, then Joe will fire another. We'll get through them quickly, and we'll delve a little bit deeper. So, first quick-fire question. Is breastfeeding painful or sore?
Breastfeeding should not be painful. If breastfeeding is painful for mum, then it's a bit of an indication that something's not quite right. Breastfeeding can be a bit of a funny feeling for women to begin with. It's a part of the body that we're not used to having touched at all. It's quite a sensitive area, especially with all the hormones that are running through mum after the birth. But no, breastfeeding should not be sore, and if it is, then seek support.
How long does a single feed last? How long should it take?
That's a great question. So it very much varies from feed to feed, baby to baby, and it will change as baby gets older as well. So to begin with, feeds might take anywhere between half an hour and an hour it can take for a newborn baby to feed. It's a brand new skill for baby and mum to be learning together, so it can take some time to get that latch right so that it's not painful and the baby's getting maximum milk. However, just like us, babies feed for all different reasons. It might be a snack, it might be a cup of tea and a biscuit, it might be a 3-course meal. So if you sit down for a 3-course meal, it takes you a lot longer than it does just to sit down and have a cup of tea and a biscuit. So babies can feed for 5-10 minutes and then just jump off. Then half an hour later, they're coming back for some more. So it very much varies. We would say to mums, not to be worrying about looking at the clock and how long it takes. Just embracing it and following your baby's lead.
Right. And that was going to be my third question. How often do babies need fed? So it could be half an hour. How long is too long between feeds, do you think?
So for a newborn baby, we're looking for them to feed at the very most to go 2 hours between feeds. But again, trying not to clock watch and following babies' cues. So babies, when they're first born, their tummies are only about the size of a cherry. It's really, really small, their little tummies. So it doesn't take much to fill their tummies, but equally it doesn't take long before their tummies are empty again and they're looking for more food. That tummy obviously grows in size as they grow. And by the time they're about a month old, it's about the size of a large egg, but still very small. So it can mean that babies might go a little bit longer between feeds. But again, just try not to clock watch and following your baby's cues, really.
Right.
And will it mean that you're going to get less sleep if you're breastfeeding?
That's a great question. So a lot of people actually think that you do get less sleep because they think, well, if mum's up feeding all night, if baby's needing fed very regularly, then they're not going to get a lot of shut-eye. But research actually tells us that breastfed babies' parents actually get more sleep than babies who are fed with formula. I'm sure there are a lot of breastfeeding mums out there who would say that's a load of nonsense, but the research does tell us that they get more sleep, and I think that's because babies actually a lot easier to settle back down to sleep. We have hormones in our milk that are sleep-inducing and can mean that breastfed babies find it easier to get back over to sleep, so mum doesn't spend as much time trying to settle them back down after a feed.
Excellent, thank you. So we're going to look a little bit deeper at some of the topics, and the one key thing is, which is part of our work, is the benefits of breastfeeding. And we'll go on to a few other things after that, but what are the main benefits of breastfeeding?
So the benefits of breastfeeding are absolutely astounding, and they go right across the whole of society. So there are benefits, of course, that we all know for baby. That breast milk is made for baby. There's nothing else been put into it, no artificial things. It's much better for their wee tummies. They're less likely to get things like tummy bugs, gastroenteritis. Babies who are breastfed are less likely to get things such as ear infections due to the way that they suck at the breast. Breastfed babies are less likely to suffer from childhood obesity and childhood cancers as they get older, and also less likely to develop diabetes as they get older. So lots and lots of health benefits for baby. Also, it's very good for infant mental health, and I know we're coming up to Infant Mental Health Awareness Week on the 12th of June. So it's fantastic for bonding between mum and baby. They get a lot of skin-to-skin time together, lots of cuddles, lots of bonding time, which is so good for baby. For mum, research has suggested that mum is less likely to suffer from all different types of cancers, such as breast cancer. And the amazing thing about that is that it's something to do with the breast milk making its way through the milk duct, because there was research done on mums who only fed from one breast, and the reduction of their likelihood to have breast cancer was actually only in that breast that they breastfed from. So it's to do with the milk working their way through. I mean, I'm not a scientist, I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I just find that fascinating that it's actually the milk that's moving through
incredible.
the breast.
Yeah.
So for mum, some mums say that it can be more convenient for them. They don't need to get up in the night making bottles. For the whole family, it can be more beneficial financially because, of course, breast milk is free. In the cost of living crisis at the moment, of course, every penny's a prisoner, and if you've got a free resource there, then of course it's good to use. For the environment, the benefits are unbelievable. So research suggests that if you took every single tin of formula that was bought in the USA in 1 year and stacked them on top of one another, it could go round the world 400 times.
Wow.
So it's a lot of tins, and you think those tins are just going to landfill. And think of all the factories that it takes to make that formula milk, all of the lorries it takes to transport that formula milk from the factories to the shops. Making formula milk, we need to click the kettle every few hours, so that's electricity that we're using. So I could go on. The benefits
the
are...
milk's instant, isn't it? You don't need to wait.
Yeah.
You don't need to wait for it to be ready. You don't need to wait for it to cool down. So if you've got a hungry baby, it's right there, ready to go.
It's ready to go. There's no waiting about with a crying baby looking for that milk. It's right at the right temperature, and it's exactly made for the baby at the age and stage that they're at. So,
how would you get breastfeeding off to a good start, would you say?
So one of the things I would say is so important to get breastfeeding off to the best start would be what we call the golden hour. So that's that hour after birth, ensuring that mum gets that skin-to-skin contact with baby. So this is a great way that dad can really support getting breastfeeding off to a good start, is ensuring that he advocates for mum, that her wishes are to breastfeed, and that it's really important to her to get that skin-to-skin contact with baby. Now, skin-to-skin is baby, no nappy on, not swaddled, no clothes on at all, in direct skin-to-skin contact with mum on her breast. And that can really help to get things off to a good start. It releases the milk-making hormones for mum, lets her body know baby is here, especially if mum's delivered through, for example, a caesarean section where the baby has not moved through the birth canal. It works as a way to tell her breast to start making this milk and that it's needed for this baby.
Yeah, skin to skin's great, isn't it? It's, the benefits was just skin to skin.
Yeah, and the fact it affects so many things, and it's so positive. It's truly one of those. I mean, our bodies are amazing, but it's just one of those mechanisms or whatever processes, whatever you want to call it, that's tremendous. How can dads support? Because obviously we can't breastfeed, but how do we support mums? How do we support our partners in this venture? Bearing in mind that sometimes, of course, it's difficult to establish breastfeeding, and I think that not only frustrates mums, but I think frustrates dads too. So how can dads be of support and help?
Definitely. So there's so many ways that dad can support mum. He can support mum. I always say, if you want to feed baby, feed mum. So mum's a milk making machine, and it takes 200 extra calories a day to actually make breast milk. So whether that's whatever, an extra meal or some extra snacks, always making sure that mum is well fed. So dad can be getting on with the meal preps, and that could be during the pregnancy, you know, getting certain meals that you know that you enjoy together, having them frozen and ready for when you get home with baby, or just having snacks close at hand when mum sits down to feed. Another way that dad can help is basically everything else. It's not the only thing that baby needs is fed. They need changed, they need bathed, they need lots of skin to skin. Dads can do that to help to bond with baby and to help to calm baby down and regulate their body temperature after the birth. There's just so many ways that dad can help to support.
Because we always recommend that dad helps set up like a wee area, like a wee breastfeeding area, comfy chair, comfy cushions, help take the feet, the weight off the feet, and then just give them the best chance with making them a tea or doing the dishes without being asked or prompted or looking for praise. So
10 to 1, mum has probably already got an area scoped out and has told him to go on, get that set up. And I think a tip we often give dads is don't wait to be asked to bring a cup of tea or whatever your favorite drink is. I mean, we can probably talk about alcohol at a different point, but just as a matter of course, go and get that. And I think it's just good practice anyway, whether you're breastfeeding or not. Just bring a drink along.
Yeah. So Amy, what other supports are available for mums who maybe be thinking about breastfeeding or maybe even struggling to breastfeed in the beginning?
Support, research tells us support is so important. In a study done in 2018, the infant feeding survey, 80% of women said that they didn't reach their breastfeeding goals.
So that's just like if a mum says, I want to breastfeed for 6 months, 80% of those people that said that maybe only got 3 months or less, or
exactly. So whether she only wanted to give the first feed or whether she wanted to feed for a year, 2 years, whatever those goals were, 80% of women in Scotland didn't reach those goals. And that got us thinking, why is that the case? And we think a lot of it is down to support, because breastfeeding is natural. They say it's the most natural thing in the world, but it's natural like walking, not like breathing. Breathing is something we do automatically. Walking, we need to learn. We need someone to hold our hand and to show us how to do it. And it's the same with breastfeeding. It's a brand new skill for mum and baby. And that doesn't matter whether it's the first baby or the 5th baby. This is the first time mum has fed that baby. So support is just so vital for mum, and the support of family and friends can make or break a breastfeeding relationship. So a lot of mums say that if they haven't had that support, whether it's moral support, from their partner, from the dad of the baby, from their family members, then that can dishearten them and mean that they stop sooner than they
and
actually
also,
wanted to.
So in public, when you're breastfeeding in public now, it's against the law to prevent someone breastfeeding. So if you're in a restaurant in Glasgow, they can't ask you to leave if you're breastfeeding now. Is that still?
It's against Scottish law. So the Breastfeeding Etc. Scotland Act came out in 2005, and that prevents anyone from stopping any baby under the age of 2 from being fed in a public place, and that's breastfed or bottle fed, and that's due to the baby's human right to be fed.
And I think also sometimes, I don't know what it's like out there if people have done this, but I know people have been asked, if you're going to breastfeed, please do it in the bathroom. And now, you wouldn't eat your meal in the toilet, so why would you feed your baby in the toilet?
Yeah.
Along those lines, and we know we want breastfeeding, we know breastfeeding is very beneficial. And we often come across couples where they've really wanted to breastfeed, but for whatever reason, mum has not been able to. So what would be your advice to mums and also to dads, partners, how they support mum through this? This is quite because I know I've had messages from people and they're extremely anxious that it's not going to plan. They have the health visitor involved and they feel they're doing something wrong. What would you advise couples on that?
So there is a lot of support out there. We're really fortunate in Glasgow that there are groups that parents can attend. So in Govan Hill, there's a group that's run by NCT along with health visitors. I'm sure could put a link at the bottom of this podcast for all the different places that you can get support. The National Breastfeeding Helpline is a brilliant support.
There's also the bank, the breast milk bank.
We have a breast milk bank in Glasgow as well, where it's donated breast milk that can be given to baby if for whatever reason mum can't breastfeed. But there is lots of support out there, and we would encourage people to seek that support and look at all the different avenues of support. They say it takes around 6 weeks to establish breastfeeding, to get it off to a good start. So if things aren't going so well in the first few days, the first week, I would always say to mums, keep at it, you've got this, let's get to week 6 and see if things improve from there.
And if that's the case, how, you're going to be worried about your baby getting enough milk. How do you know your baby's getting enough milk if that's the case?
That's a great question. So if we want to count anything, counting peas and poos is really helpful. So as a parent, you'll get really used to having a look at nappies. What goes in must come out. So the colour of baby's poo will actually change from newborn. They'll change from having more of a kind of sticky, marmitey kind of consistency to them, and then eventually will change into more of a kind of greeny, pesto-y kind of way, and then eventually go to a kind of mustard yellow. And that's a great indication that baby is got milk getting into their bodies. And if there is any change backwards from there, then that's something to have a look at with your health visitor or with a breastfeeding peer supporter.
Because it's not unusual for a baby to drop its weight in the initial week or so. So another, when your health visitor comes out, just check the weights of your baby. Would that be something you'd look at if maybe the baby wasn't gaining weight after, 4 or 5 weeks?
So every baby's different, and sometimes babies can be a higher birth weight because of medical intervention during the birth, or whether mum has got fluids, or how baby came to be in the world, basically. So your health visitor will have a look at baby's weight and will let you know if they are concerned. But it's perfectly normal for a breastfed baby to drop anywhere between 8 and 10% of their birth weight. But the best way to find out how much milk, we don't have a gauge on the side of our breast to know exactly how much milk is going into baby, but the best way would be those nappies, counting the nappies, keeping an eye that they're going in the right direction, that baby's having the correct number of peas and poos in a day. Everybody gets the Ready Steady Baby book when baby is born or during their pregnancy. It's also available online if you just search Ready Steady Baby, and they should also get a brilliant book called Off to a Good Start, which is all about breastfeeding, and it's got everything in it that you need to know. It's basically like the breastfeeding Bible. Got how many peas and poos you should be expecting from day 1 to 4, day 4 to 6, and you can chat through that with your health visitor if you are concerned.
That's fantastic. I think there are so many resources out there, and I know from our previous discussions there's a lot more that we could cover in breastfeeding. We want to get some key takeaways, and you've covered a few of them already. We had, I really like that it's natural like walking, not like breathing, and I think that hopefully goes a long way to removing anxiety about it. It's, all of a sudden you need to be perfect in doing the right thing, but breastfeeding's a skill, not something that it's like learning to walk, as you said. Also, the golden hour.
Yep. So that first hour after baby's born, skin-to-skin contact is just so important. It's almost like plugging mum's breasts in at the wall, telling mum's breasts that this baby has arrived, start making milk. Breast milk works on supply and demand. So if we don't demand it from our bodies won't supply it.
Right.
Is there any particular time that's better to feed your baby? During the morning, night time? Does it matter? Or?
So babies don't know what time of day it is. They don't have a clock.
No, I mean for the milk or for the mum.
Oh, right.
Point of view.
So some mums find, for expressing their milk, that they might get more milk when they first get up in the morning, because that's probably when they've had the most amount of time not feeding their baby. So if they did want to express their milk using an electric or a hand pump, then that would probably be a good time. But as I say, babies take from their mum exactly what they need at the time that they need it. So whether they need a 3-course meal or they just need a cup of tea and a biscuit, they will take exactly what they need. And that's the amazing thing about babies. They are pre-wired to take exactly what they need. You can't overfeed a breastfed baby.
In terms of advocating for mum, now we're always careful around this topic. We're not saying speaking over mum or speaking for mum, but sometimes we know mums can get into a really frustrated state if they cannot breastfeed. And as we know, so many times with mums, with dads, with parents, if we don't have the support and we can't see a way out, we kind of get stuck in that place. How would you best, what can dads do if because they might not know what to do. How best can they support mums if things are not going well? And who would they speak to? What would they do?
So I think it's really important that before baby even comes along, mum and dad are having a chat about mum's wishes. So you'll probably be having these conversations about the birth and making some decisions about what mum wishes for the birth. It's good to have that conversation about feeding as well. How strongly does mum feel about feeding? How long would she like to feed her baby for? And so that dad has it clear in his mind exactly what her wishes are. All the support that is out there is not only there for mum, it's there for dad too. So the National Breastfeeding Helpline regularly get phone calls from dads.
Right, okay.
I'm actually a volunteer on the Breastfeeding Helpline, and we do get regular phone calls from dads who want to support and want to kind of know more about feeding. Maybe don't have the confidence to go along to a group face to face, but you can just pick up the phone anonymously and phone the free phone number.
What would you say about feeding with a mixture of breast and formula?
So combination feeding, so feeding a little bit of breast milk and a little bit of formula milk, is actually the fastest growing way to feed babies in 2023. More and more people are doing it. It's absolutely fantastic to do that. If that's what keeps your breastfeeding journey alive, giving a little bit of formula as well, any amount of breast milk that you give your baby is so beneficial to them for life. The very first milk that mum gets is called colostrum, often called liquid gold. It's absolutely packed with antibodies. It's like giving your baby a mini vaccination at birth. And if mum decides that that's the only feed she wants to give and then wants to continue formula feeding, that's still fantastic. Giving baby the best start in life. But yeah, it's a really good option if people are struggling with breastfeeding or they're finding it all a little bit overwhelming or dad wants to help, is combination feeding.
Right.
And sorry, Doug, just before we start to finish up with the last wee bit, what about expressing and how long could you keep it, store it, that kind of thing?
Great question. So there's a great guide on the Breastfeeding Network's website, which you'll find if you just search for the Breastfeeding Network, it'll come right up. And we kind of go by the rule of 666. So if breast milk is left out at room temperature, you can leave it out for 6 hours. If it's left in the fridge, depending on the temperature of the fridge, but it's around 6 days, as long as it's in the main part of the fridge and not in the door. But if it's frozen, it can be kept up to 6 months in the freezer and still be used. So if mum's expressing her breast milk, then it doesn't give it to the baby. It can technically be used for weaning. It could be put into baby's porridge, into their Weetabix in the morning when they start to introduce solid foods. It's also got amazing pain-killing properties in it, and can be used for things such as eye infections, little cuts or bumps that baby might have. So yeah, it's amazing stuff, and it can be kept up to 6 months in the freezer. So.
And while we're on the fridge, another thing, a key thing to take away is to feed mum.
Yeah.
Feed mum, feed your baby.
Yeah.
Like you said earlier.
I think it's the one area that we know around everything around birthing, whether it's sleep patterns and feeding. You always get a lot of times unsolicited advice from your auntie, your uncle, your whoever, strangers on the street. We've experienced that. What's your advice to people on that? Because it can be quite confusing, and even you look and you hear of research, and and there's always something going on about duration of breastfeeding. Oh, scientists say you should now only breastfeed for 3 months, and others say no, 3 years, and no, it's definitely minimum 6 months, and it's forever moving. What's your guidance on all these seemingly conflicting ideas and old wives' tales maybe that are out there?
So as you say, Doug, as soon as you're pregnant, everybody's got an opinion on it. They want to tell you all about what they did and what worked for them. But it's remembering that research does move on. We're in 2023 now, and the person that's maybe giving you advice maybe had their baby 30, 40 years ago, and things have moved on. So often it's just ignoring this and, you know, in a kind way, you know, nodding along and taking their advice, but doing it your way and doing what works for you and your family. I'm a strong believer in it being about choice when it comes to feeding your baby, but it being informed choice, and that you have all the information to make the best decision for your family. So yeah, trying to ignore those people, though they mean well, trying to ignore all the kind of conflicting advice that you might get related to feeding.
Yeah. And I think there's, and for those of you who've not experienced that, it is quite something to behold when you have even strangers coming up to you on the streets suggesting what you, asking how is it going, what you should be doing.
It's quite an emotional subject for
it
people,
is.
because as I said, if around 80% of women aren't reaching their breastfeeding goals, that can be a grief for people that they hold with them for
and
the
the last
rest
thing
of
you
their...
need is someone to come up and who's probably well-meaning, let's face it, they're probably well-meaning, but they have no idea of your journey through this. They have no idea of what that specific child needs, because babies are all different. And if you have been struggling and all of a sudden you get this advice that will make everything better, or just do this or just do that, when maybe mom has been trying all those things and nothing's worked. But so I'm glad we're at a point where we have a lot of research out there, and that there is, especially in Glasgow, so much support. For those of you who are looking for support, you just look in the description below. We'll have a number of links for you to follow should you need it. Joe, is there anything I've left out or that we've left out or missed?
Probably,
but
you can talk about breast milk for so long, can you? You can talk about breastfeeding for so long, and there's a lot of questions for, you know, everyone. There's not enough time to cover every single thing. But like Doug says, we're going to put a description and the link below of all the resources that are available to you. And we wish you well on your breastfeeding journey.
Thank you, Amy, for shedding some light on the processes. And we look to have you back in the future.
Yeah, that would be great. I could talk breastfeeding all day.
Excellent.
Thank
you.
You.
Thanks, everyone. And thank you for listening.
Thanks, guys.